Time weighs down on you like an old, ambiguous dream. You keep on moving, trying to slip through it. But even if you go to the ends of the earth, you won't be able to accept it. Still, you have to go there, to the edge of the world. There's something you can't do unless you get there. So I just read Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami. This is my second Murakami book. I read Norwegian Wood a few months ago, 3 weeks ago actually. And yeah, I'm gonna try and talk about this book. First of all, I liked it. I like Murakami. I like his prose, the way he writes, the imagery he evokes. It really feels like it takes you to a place. Like, I've never been to Japan, but I've always wanted to go, and it feels like reading his books, I'm going to Japan. In Norwegian Wood, I'm going to Japan, and then in what was it, the 1960s? And this one, like early 2000s, late 90s. I'll say 90s. It just feels like a different time period that I'm visiting. I'd love to read a book of his in sort of the internet era, and then one in like the smartphone era. There are times when he meets a character and then he sort of says goodbye to him, and he's like, I'll see you some other time. But in sort of the cell phone age, we would just you would text them, or you would add them to some sort of social media, and you could follow them and continue to hear from them. Anyways, I want to read more Murakami, and hopefully set in different time periods. And he's got quite a catalog, and I've heard so many good things about so many different books of his that I don't really know where to start next. I've already started, but I don't know where to go next, I should say. Yeah, there are quite a few that are on my list. But anyways, this was Kafka on the Shore. It was a bit of a bigger one. It's 467 pages, and I really savored it. Like, it took me a while to get through, but not in a bad way. It didn't feel like it was dragging on or anything. I'd sit down and read, and then I'd read again, and then I'd read for a third day and a fourth day, and then I'd realize I'm only 70 pages in, and I was like, how? Time became very strange while reading this book, and it did take me like over 2 weeks, I think, to read, which is kind of unreal. But a lot of this book is very unreal, so I would recommend it. I don't think I can compare it to Norwegian Wood, not yet, at least, having only read the two and having just finished this one. I don't know. I want to say I liked Norwegian Wood better, but Norwegian Wood was just a straight up romance story, whereas this is very much a magical realism story, and they feel like two totally different genres and two totally different types of story that I don't think you can compare the two, or at least I can't. Anyway, so I'll get into sort of the spoilers of this book, although again, I don't think spoilers matter for a book. If you know how a book's going to turn out, if the book is good, it's still worth reading. It's not about the sort of the destination. It's not about figuring out who done it, and then once you know that, the book is worthless. No, I think a lot of good books, even if you know what's going to happen, you have to read them to fully experience and enjoy them. So this one had two main character POVs that we followed. One was in third person past tense, like most stories, following Mr. Nagata, who is an older man who has some sort of intellectual disability that he can't read or write. He lives very much in the present, which I think is important. He doesn't really have memories. He cannot think in abstract. He's living off a government subsidy because of his disability. And he can also talk to cats, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So the story doesn't so much start chronologically. It starts back during the War in the Pacific, in the 1940s. Something, they think it's an American plane, is flying overhead over Japan, over the area in the country where a whole bunch of children are out gathering mushrooms. They all go unconscious, and their teacher's sort of really shocked by this. She reveals later that she had a dream, a very realistic dream, with her husband in it, who was off to war, and she sort of knew or understood her husband to be dead at that time, but in this dream they had sex, and it was like amazing, and so she was thinking about it the whole rest of the day. Anyways, all these kids go unconscious. She's shocked. They go, and eventually the kids start to come to, but they have no memories of the intervening time, except for this one kid, Nakata, who remains in a coma for like 2 or 3 weeks until he finally wakes up, and it's almost like his soul has been emptied. He has no memories at all. He can't read or write. He struggles intellectually, and sort of gets bumped around. His family stops paying attention to him because he's no longer has sort of capabilities. They don't see him as someone who's going to intellectually or academically succeed in school and in life and be able to provide for them. So he gets bumped around and eventually becomes this Mr. Nakata that we see in this book. And like I said, he can talk to cats. So what he does is he helps people find their cats. If you need a cat found, if your cat's missing, you go to Nakata-san. So he's looking for this cat Golma. And he's talking to other cats and trying to figure out where this cat is. And they're like, last we saw her, she was in this abandoned lot, and she got picked up by this bad man, and it seems like it's some sort of a cat catcher. So he sort of camps out trying to find this person. A dog then comes up to him. It doesn't so much speak to him, but he hears the voice in his head of the dog ordering him to follow. So he follows this dog, and it takes him to a place where there's this man in a house called Johnny Walker, and he's essentially the character / logo Johnny Walker from the I don't know, some sort of a English whiskey, I think. Anyways, done up in the full regalia of like the red coattails and the tall silk hat, and he claims to be Johnny Walker. And this part gets really disturbing. There's a few disturbing. I guess this is the most disturbing part in the book. He's like, yeah, I catch cats. He opens up a fridge door and it's lined with the heads of cats, and he's like, I kill cats and I take their souls and I'm turning their souls into a flute. And my goal is to get so many cat souls and to create this flute that gets so big that I can then use it to create a bigger flute with even more souls from like humans. And it's just like, it's very bizarre. What do you mean you're turning cat souls into a flute? And I don't know, maybe there is more meaning to this, but I just sort of, with magical realism, I find you just sort of have to take it as it comes and go with it. Much like the characters in books, sort of take things that seem bizarre and just go with it. So Johnny Walker then says, Nakata, you have to kill me. That's why you're here. I need you to kill me. And Nakata's like, well, I've never killed anyone before. Actually, Nakata speaks in the third person. But anyways, Johnny's like, okay, well, if you can kill me, then you'll get this cat back that you want. Otherwise, I'm going to kill the cat. And he starts pulling cats out of his bag that are paralyzed, but not anesthetized. They can still feel pain, but they can't move. And he slices them out, their belly open. He rips their heart out while it's still beating, and he eats it. And then he saws their heads off and puts it in with his collection. Really gruesome. So he does this to a couple cats, and then he's about to do it to these cats that Nakata knows. So something sort of snaps in Nakata. He gets up, takes the knife, and stabs and kills Johnny Walker. And Johnny Walker's laughing, like, great, you did it, you killed me. And he leaves. Nakata then sort of has this internal compass pulling him westward. He doesn't know why, but he has to leave the city. He has to go to this location. And we follow him as he tries to navigate the city. He eventually comes across this truck driver, Hoshino. And Hoshino and Nakata team up. Hoshino's like a truck driver in his mid-20s. He used to be in the SDF, sort of the military. And he agrees to help Nakata out. He sees sort of Nakata as, it reminds him of his grandfather who helped him out quite a bit. So he's like, all right, come on, Nakata, I'll help you out. You want to go west for whatever reason? Sure. So they go on sort of a crazy, spontaneous adventure where Nakata doesn't really know where he's going or what he has to do, but he knows he has to. And that sort of spontaneity and that sort of living in the moment, living in the present, which I think is one of the themes of this book, really gets to Hoshino. And he, by the end of it, he's very much a changed person. He starts listening to classical music, or he hears the classical music in a coffee shop, and he changes as a character, and I think the character of Hoshino is probably my favorite one in the book. I think it's the most interesting. But yeah, so Nakata is strange. He will fall asleep for 36 hours at a time. But he eventually starts saying that he needs to find this entrance stone. What the entrance stone is, he doesn't know. But anyways, they need to find it. So at one point, when Nakata's out cold, sleeping for 36 hours or whatever, Hoshino's sort of out on the town, and he bumps into Colonel Sanders of KFC fame, and he's like, "Why are you dressed up like Colonel Sanders?" That guy's like, "No, I am Colonel Sanders," and we sort of get the sense here that, I mean, Colonel Sanders says it right. I'm not a person. I'm not a god. I'm a concept, and it seems like Colonel Sanders' goal, much like that of Johnny Walker, is to correct the timeline in a way. There is some sense that things, for whatever reason, have not gone the way they were meant to go, and whatever Johnny Walker, whatever Colonel Sanders are, they are, their goal is to right some wrong that's happened and make things right again. And for example, Nakata mentions the war, like the Pacific War, a few times, but a lot of the other characters seem really confused by that. They're like, Japan's never been in a big war like that. Japan was never occupied by the Americans. And so I was like, oh, is this some sort of alternate timeline where the war didn't happen? I'm not sure, because it was just like a handful of very small references to that. So I kind of got the sense that that was wrong and that had to be corrected. But in our other storyline, that doesn't seem to be the case. The war seems to be a thing that definitely happened. But anyways, back to Nakata and Hoshino. So Hoshino runs into Colonel Sanders, and Colonel Sanders is like, "Hey, you're looking for the entrance stone. I know where that is." And he's like, What are you talking about? "I'll tell you, but you have to order a prostitute from me." And Hoshino's like, "Why can't you just tell me?" He's like, "Nope, gotta have a prostitute." So Hoshino has a prostitute, and it's like the best prostitute of his life. It was a philosophy major who's doing it to put herself through college. And she talks philosophy. There's a lot in this book that's like a lot of philosophy, a lot of literature and music and culture and stuff. There's so much sort of background stuff that you would have to have read to totally not get this. But I mean, there's reference to Sophocles and Euripides and Aeschylus, if I'm saying that right. Shakespeare, lots of Shakespeare. Lots of 18th century classical music, a lot of German musicians mentioned, a lot of stuff that I don't know or have experience with. The author, I guess Murakami, is very well read and very cultured, which hopefully someday I can be too. Anyways, Hoshino returns to Colonel Sanders after the deed, and Colonel Sanders takes him into a shrine, and inside the shrine is this stone. And so he takes the stone. It's kind of heavy, but he takes it back and sets it next to Nakata. Nakata wakes up, sees the stone, is like, "Oh great, this is the entrance stone." And he starts talking to it and trying to figure out what the next step is. Eventually he says, "Well, it's an entrance stone. You need to open the entrance." And this is done by just flipping the stone over. However, the stone is normally just a stone, but when it becomes the entrance stone, it suddenly becomes very heavy. And like I said, magical realism, you just sort of have to accept it and go with it. So he gets Hoshino to pick it up and flip it over. Doing so opens the way, or something becomes open at that point. And so now it's open, whatever it is. And it's around this point that Colonel Sanders gets a hold of Yoshino via phone and says, "Hey, the cops are looking for you. There was this famous sculptor, Tomura, who was killed in Nakano Ward. He was stabbed 2 times. They're looking for an old man and a young truck driver who's with them. So you've got to hide out." So he gets him an apartment to hide out in. So that's when it's sort of revealed that Nakata did actually kill someone, but he didn't kill Johnny Walker. The whole Johnny Walker thing must have been an illusion or something. But he killed this sculptor, this man, Tomura, I think it is. So they don't really know where to go next, but they're in sort of the right city. So Nakata's like, "Hey, rent a car and we'll just drive around and we'll find the place." So they do so, and they eventually come across this library, the I think it's a Komura Memorial Library, and Nakata's like, this is the place, this is where we're meant to be. And it's night, so they're like, we'll come back in the morning when it's open. So they come back in the morning. They meet this guy Oshima, who is sort of at the desk. He's like, hey, how can I help you? They're like, we're just here, we're going to do some reading. So they do some reading. Hoshino starts reading about Beethoven, a biography. Nakata just reads a book about, like a picture book. And eventually they go on a tour of the building. The tours start at 2 on Tuesdays, and it's Tuesday, so they take this tour with Miss Saiki. And Miss Saiki is a sort of middle-aged woman who runs the library, and she takes them on this tour. After the tour, Nakata's like, goes up and talks to Miss Saiki, even though he's not supposed to be there. Like that area of the library is off limits, but he goes and talks to her, and he says, I want to talk to you about the entrance stone. And she seems to know what he's talking about, so she tells everyone else to leave. She's like, I'm going to have a conversation with him. So they sit down, and she's like relieved. She's like, I knew this was coming. I've been waiting for a long time. She gives him all this stuff she's been writing. So for like 20 years or something like that, she's been writing sort of her life story. And she gives it to him, and she says, I don't want any memories when I'm gone. I want you to take all this and burn it all. So that's what happens. Nakata then leaves. Hoshino goes with him. They go out and burn all of these records of Saiki's life. Oshima goes upstairs to talk to Saiki, and she's dead. She has had a heart attack, not suicide, but she's just naturally died. It was sort of her time. She had fulfilled her purpose or whatever, and then she died. Nakata and Hoshino go back to the apartment where the entrance stone is, and then Nakata dies in his sleep. He sort of also fulfilled his purpose. So then Hoshino is the most interesting character in the book. He's left on his own. He doesn't really know what to do. Oh, also, after killing Johnny Walker, Nakata could no longer talk to cats, but he did predict or cause fish to fall from the sky and then leeches to fall from the sky at one point. So these two other supernatural phenomena that were somehow linked to Nakata. Anyways, I just forgot about that. So Nakata has died. Hoshino's like, what do? I can't go to the police because the entrance stone's still open, and I don't want to let Nakata down. Like, Hoshino's a firm believer at this point. He's trying to figure out what to do. He's like, maybe Colonel Sanders will call me and tell me what to do. Eventually this cat shows up, and the cat starts talking to him, and he realizes he can talk to cats now. And the reason for this it's not that he can talk to cats or that this cat can talk to him. It's that they're sort of at some weird boundary, some sort of liminal space between worlds where they speak a common language. And the cat sort of tells him, like, hey, you have to shut the entrance stone. That's what Nakata wants. And something's going to want to get through that entrance stone at night, and you're going to have to kill it. Liquidate it with extreme prejudice is how it's translated. So Hoshino's like, okay, whatever. So at night, this like weird white slimy long creature comes out of the corpse of Nakata through his mouth, and Hoshino's trying to kill it, but it doesn't seem to have any effect. It's heading for the entrance stone. So then Hoshino goes and he has to lift the entrance stone up again and close it. However, it has become so heavy, and it's heavier than it's ever been. But he just, through sheer willpower, manages to actually flip it over and seal the entrance off. Now that the entrance is off, this weird creature thing seems to be vulnerable, and Hoshino cuts it all up and kills it. And that's sort of the end of Hoshino's story. He's going to go back to Tokyo, get his old job back if he can, but he's definitely a changed person from his whole experience with Nakata. And he says he's going to call the cops and tell them that he's where to find the body of Mr. Nakata, and that sort of wraps up half of the story. Not even the main half, I'd say. I'd say this is sort of the secondary storyline, but to me it was the more interesting one in a way. So that was that. So that's half of the story. The main story, we'll say, is in the present tense first person, which is unique and definitely noticeable when compared to the third person past tense narrative of Nakata and Hoshino. And they're not told one isn't told before the other. There's sort of one chapter will be one POV, and then the next chapter will be the other, and it's back and forth sequentially. Also interspersed with the very start of the book was introductions to this sort of event that happened when all these kids went unconscious, and then we have sort of interviews with U.S. military interviewing people trying to figure out what happened, and it's never really explained what happened. I imagine it's something to do with the entrance stone being open and this woman having access to the ghost of her husband, but I don't know. I'd be curious to watch some videos of people who actually know what this book's all about, but again, that's not what this is for. So we have the character Kafka Tamura. His name's not actually Kafka. He just takes that name on as he's running away from home. So his father, who's a famous sculptor, he lives with his father. His mother and his sister left when he was like 4 years old, and he has no memory of them. He can't remember his mother's face. He doesn't know why she left, but he's a troubled youth. He's 15, and he's decided he's running away from home. So he runs away from home. He reads about this old library in this place. So he goes to this place, the Komura Memorial Library, which we will see in the other POV later on. And meets Oshima, meets this girl. So on his way to very, very Murakami, on his way when he's running away from home, he's on a bus. And this beautiful girl just happens to sit next to him. She's like 19 or something. Just wants to chat to him and gives him her number. And so at one point he calls her and goes to her place and they sort of sleep together, kind of, in a way. But he sort of has this weird feeling that she's his sister. And it's never confirmed or denied, but for the sake of the story, she is his. I think he never has a biological sister. I think his mother and his father adopted another girl who was older than him. So they refer to each other as brother and sister, even if this isn't the girl that was adopted into his family. For all intents and purposes, she is his sister. And we're introduced to this sort of prophecy that his father gave Kafka, that one day you will kill your father, sleep with your mother, and also sleep with your sister. So it's the story of Oedipus Rex, this character in Greek myth who kills his father, sleeps with his mother, becoming the king of Mycenae or whatever, and marries his mother. Anyways, so that's the sort of the prophecy that Kafka's been given. And we find out later that his father does get killed and is stabbed to death. The night that this happens, Kafka wakes up in the woods. He doesn't know how he got there. He's covered in blood. He has no memory of the past few hours. It's very mysterious. It seems that what happened was somehow his spirit had left his body, and it's somehow that like Nakata killing Johnny Walker was actually Kafka killing his father, but not literally, but Kafka's the one who ended up with blood on him, not Nakata. It's very strange. Anyways, I can't really make perfect sense of it, and I don't think it's meant to have perfect sense made of it. So Kafka's father's dead. At this time, Kafka has been sort of taken on by Oshima and Miss Saiki as sort of a helper in the library. Yeah, and there's this painting on the wall with this boy on the seashore. But it turns out that this is a painting of the boy that Miss Saiki was in love with. So much like in Norwegian Wood, we have Miss Saiki and this other boy who grew up together and were soulmates. They were totally from birth, like, in love, and it was just, that's just the way it was, and they were going to live happily ever after. He went off to Tokyo to go to school. One of the protests at the school, members of the protest took him for someone else and ended up torturing and beating him to death. So Miss Saiki she says that she died when she was 20 and has just been sort of living ever since. So this painting is a painting of that boy that she had been in love with. He had been a Komura, so he had lived in this room where the painting is. And Miss Saiki, when he was still alive, when he had just left to go to college, she had wrote this poem and set it to music called Kafka on the Shore. And it actually got published and was kind of famous for a bit. Which is the name of the book. But also I think the name of the book refers to the main character, Kafka Tamura, being on sort of the shores of consciousness. which I'll get into later maybe. So as Kafka's asleep in this room, he sees Miss Saiki, or rather a ghost of her, but not of her in the present, of her as a 15-year-old girl. And she's sitting at this desk staring at this painting. And he just becomes so in love with her, of this 15-year-old Miss Saiki. This just happens night after night. He's seeing this sort of ghost of 15-year-old Miss Saiki, yeah. And then he sort of eventually becomes... The lines blur between the 15-year-old Miss Saiki and the 55-year-old Miss Saiki, and he sort of falls in love with both of them. But then he starts to assume that Miss Saiki is his mother, because she wrote this song, she became famous, and then there's like a 20-year gap where she sort of fell off the face of the earth, when some people like were thought she had kids and had a family. And this one's not... I think it's basically explicitly stated that yes, this is his mother. He sort of assumes it is, but she doesn't say it right. She says that... She drops hints like, oh, I once wrote a book about the survivors of lightning strikes. He's like, my father was struck by lightning. Maybe that's how you guys met. And she's like, that's a theory, but it's just a theory. And he's like, but until it's proven otherwise, it's still a workable theory or whatever. How does it work? I think he dreams of sleeping with her and then tells her about it, or doesn't so much tell her about it, but he goes and confronts her and then sort of proclaims that he is in love with her. Whether it's the 15-year-old her or the her of now, doesn't really matter. So eventually she does come and sleeps with him a couple times. So he does manage to sleep with his sister, his mother, and kill his father. He also has a dream where he is with the girl Sakura, the girl who he met on the bus, who he assumes is his sister, and he rapes her. And she says like, "Don't! I have a boyfriend in Tokyo. You know this is rape." And he's like, "It's too bad. Like, there's nothing I can do." And she's like, "You can stop." He's like, "No, I can't." Why can't you? Well, because I choose not to, or something. It's stupid. And this is all happening in a dream because they're not actually physically there. And I assumed it was a dream that both of them were experiencing, and that makes it real. But later on, he calls her at the very end of the book and says like, "Hey, I dreamed about you." And she's like, "Yeah, I dreamed about you too." But her dream is totally different. Her dream was him in the labyrinth trying to find someone, and someone was there trying to find him as well. Also, Kafka, just check for Crow, has this boy next to him, which is sort of a part of him. A boy called Crow, who sort of, I don't know, it's not an alter ego, but it's a part of him, and it talks to him and sort of gives him advice and helps him along, sort of thing. It's very strange. There's so many pieces to this very strange puzzle. So anyways, he's at the library. Word is that the cops are looking for him because his father's been murdered and nothing was stolen, so they assume it was a personal vendetta, and it just so happens his 15-year-old son that he doesn't get along with is missing. But he has the alibi that he was at the library. Everyone knows he is. But he still doesn't want to go to the cops for whatever reason. So Oshima, by the way, Oshima. So I think Oshima is very much a stand-in for the author. Oshima is very, very smart, very educated, even though Oshima also dropped out of school and ran away from home when he was young. Oshima is a very interesting character. Oshima is, we find out through a very strange instance where these two women come to the library and start sort of harassing Oshima that they're feminists and they're part of this feminist organization, and this library is so patriarchal, and I don't know how to explain it, but the library like only has one restroom, so it should have separate ones so women can have their own. And why aren't the books separated by female authors and male authors, and all these sort of bizarre, sort of unreasonable claims, which I think is the author's sort of attack on feminism, which maybe it's not. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe, no, I don't think so. I think it is an attack on feminism, on a certain type of feminism, which, I mean, the characters in this book, of course, they're portrayed this way for like purposefully, but anyways, they're attacking Yoshima and saying like, you're part of the patriarchy, like you're trying to use words to mess with us, because he's sort of using wordplay and logic to make these women look like idiots. But then he takes out his driver's license and reveals that he was born a woman. He's actually it's weird to stick labels on to stick like 2025 labels from Western civilization on Japanese, something Japanese from 25 years ago, but we'll say he's trans or non-binary. He uses he him pronouns. His brother refers to him as his brother, although sometimes he's like brother, sister, whatever. I'll just call him brother because that makes him happy. But it really threw me. Like, I didn't expect to have this sort of portrayal of gender in a book from this period, from this country. And I honestly, I think it was really well done. I think it was a great representation of people who don't fit expected gender norms, and who, like, this was clearly a male presenting masculine individual who just happened to be born as a woman, and he is I don't know, it was just really well done. Anyway, so Oshima hears that the cops are looking for Kafka, so he takes Kafka out to this cabin way out in the woods that his brother owns or built. While there, that's when Nakata and Hoshino show up at the library. That's why Kafka's not there at the time. So Kafka is way out in the woods, and before he leaves, Oshima says to Kafka, "Do not go out in the woods. Like, people get lost out there. It's a labyrinth." Back in the war, they were doing exercises out there, and these two soldiers got lost, and no one's ever seen them again. They were never found. So of course, he goes out there, and he goes deeper and deeper into the woods, and he comes across the two soldiers, and they're like, "Oh, hey, are you coming in or something?" He's like, "They're like, the entrance is open." So like the entrance stone, the entrance is open now. You can come in. So he goes in and follows them. They take him to this sort of village, this closed off village in this like hidden valley. And he gets a cabin there, and he stays there, and then this girl shows up and starts cooking meals for him and cleaning for him. And it is 15-year-old Miss Saiki, but she has no memory of meeting him. She has sort of no memories at all, in this sort of weird purgatory liminal space. And so he's sort of shocked. I mean, this is the girl that he's been so in love with. So like 2 days he spends there, and she keeps showing up. And then on the third day, I think it is, Miss Saiki, the older one who does have her memories, shows up and talks to him and says like, "Hey, I had all my memories, all my history burned, but I wanted to talk to you before I forgot about you, about us." And it's sort of revealed at that point that yes, she is in fact his mother. Not explicitly stated, but for all intents and purposes, she is his mother. And then she goes and vanishes, sort of moving on, presumably to something else. So while he's in this sort of weird liminal purgatory, Miss Saiki says, like, "You have to go back. You have to leave. You have to live. You have to do this for me." And so he goes back to the soldiers, and they're like, "You're ready to go? Like, the way's still open, but by the time we get there, it might not be. Anyways, let's go." They're like, "Do not look back no matter what." And he does. He gets to the part where he can just see the village. He turns around and he remembers that 15-year-old Saiki that's still there. And if he goes back, he can actually be with her. And he wants to so badly, but he thinks of what the older Miss Saiki said. And he's like, "Nope, I have to go on." So he goes on. And these soldiers lead him out. And eventually he makes it back to the cabin. And then Oshima's brother shows up, who's like a surfer. He's got a big truck. He says, "Get in the truck. Oshima told me to take you back." So he heads back to the library. Oshima tells him that Saiki's dead. He sort of already knew that. And then he's made up his mind. He's going back to Tokyo. He's going to go back to school and sort of live out the rest of his life, never forgetting Miss Saiki. And yeah, it's sort of at the end he says like, "I'll come back. Like, your brother told me that he'd give me surfing lessons," and it's all very melancholy. And he calls Sakura, the girl he met, who's like maybe his sister, and it's like just chats with her for a bit and wraps things up. And that's sort of the end of the book. It's very beautiful and very sad and very mysterious. Very, I was gonna say Kafkaesque. I meant Murakami-esque. But I just want to read this, not It's a paragraph on the final page, and it's set off by spaces on its own. Time weighs down on you like an old, ambiguous dream. You keep on moving, trying to slip through it. But even if you go to the ends of the earth, you won't be able to accept it. Still, you have to go there, to the edge of the world. There's something you can't do unless you get there. So the whole book plays with sort of themes of time and how time has no meaning, in the past and the present and the future all sort of blend together, which was really, really interesting. Like having the Miss Saiki as a young girl, and there was a lot of so when Saiki slept with Kafka, she sort of saw him as Kafka on the shore. So that song she wrote called Kafka on the Shore, which was for her boyfriend, the boy in the painting, and Kafka sort of saw himself eventually as the boy in the painting. So Kafka, who is her son but is also her lover, who had died 20 years previous, like I said, past, present, identity, it all very much blends together, but it's done in a really good way. And it's strange that the story with the man who can summon leeches from the sky and talk to cats was the less crazy of the stories, the more straightforward of the stories, even though that's the one where Johnny Walker was stabbed and Colonel Sanders was a pimp. But I don't know, the storyline with Hoshino I thought was really good. But the story with Kafka also was really good. Yeah, that blending of past and present, and there's a quote in the book which I should have wrote down. It's not Murakami didn't write it. It's a quote from someone else, but it's something like how the past is already solidified and the future is so fluid and malleable that the present is the only reality we have, and we can only exist in the present. Yeah, what a book. Anyways, that was Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami.